The city glowed below like a grid of stars, but inside the 47th floor office of Alexander Pierce, it was cold and silent. The hum of success surrounded him, polished wood, glass walls, framed accolades, but none of it made him feel alive. He leaned back in his leather chair, loosened his tie, and stared at the untouched dinner tray his assistant had left hours ago. Another night alone. No family waiting. No laughter echoing down the halls. Just emails, board meetings, and an empty calendar on his birthday. On impulse, he left early, if 9 p.m. could be called early in his world. The rain had started to fall when he stepped out of his black town car at the edge of a small park, the kind he used to pass without a second glance. He didn't know what made him stop that night. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the silence. Maybe it was something else. And that's when he saw her. A little girl sat on a swing, her legs dangling, soaked from head to toe, but smiling as she pushed herself back and forth. No umbrella. No one else around. Just her, and the storm. As Alexander approached, she looked up, wide-eyed, curious, and tilted her head. Then, in the sweetest, most unexpected voice, she asked, "Can you be my friend?" He blinked, unsure if he'd heard her right. He looked around, wondering if someone had put her up to it. But no, there was no one else. Just a child, offering the one thing he hadn't been asked in years. Not for money. Not for influence. Just, friendship. And in that fleeting moment, something in his perfectly constructed world cracked. And light began to shine through. Alexander stood there, momentarily speechless. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals, faced down ruthless competitors, and spoken before crowds of thousands, yet now, faced with a rain-soaked little girl and a simple question, he didn't know what to say. Still, something about her felt pure. Unfiltered. Safe. So he gave a small nod and walked over to the bench beside the swings. She beamed. "I'm Ava," she said, swinging a little higher. "I come here when Mommy's working. She says it's better than staying inside all day." Alexander studied her, no umbrella, her shoes too small, a rip in her jacket's sleeve. But she didn't complain. She talked. And oh, did she talk. About how her dog was named Pickles and barked at pigeons. How her favorite story was about a flying treehouse. How she once tried to bake cookies but burned them so bad they turned into lava rocks. She laughed at her own stories, glancing at him between words, waiting for his smile. And he did smile. More than he had in weeks. "Do you work in one of those tall buildings?" she asked, pointing upward. "I do," he replied. She grinned. "You must be very smart. Maybe even important." Alexander chuckled softly. "Maybe. But not important enough to have a friend like you." She gave a satisfied nod, then leaned back on the swing, face to the rain. "Then you're lucky I found you." That hit him like a whisper from a life he'd forgotten how to live. No titles. No handshakes. No expectations. Just a child offering her presence without agenda. And for the first time in years, Alexander didn't feel alone. He felt seen. And somewhere deep inside, something began to thaw. For the next 2 weeks, the park became Alexander's sanctuary. Each evening, he arrived a little earlier, no tie, no driver, just him. Ava would be there waiting, swinging, her cheeks pink from the cold and her stories already queued up. They talked about everything from cloud shapes to favorite animals. She'd never once asked who he was. She just liked him, as he was. But one night, she didn't show. He waited on the bench. 5 minutes. 10. 30. Rain began to fall. Still, no sign of her. A pit formed in his stomach. He found himself pacing the edge of the park, scanning the streets, wondering what to do. Why am I so worried? he asked himself. She's just a child I barely know. But he did know her. Maybe not in facts, but in spirit. Ava had become a flicker of warmth in his otherwise cold life. The next morning, he returned, not to the office, but to the neighborhood. After asking a few vendors and a kind old librarian, he was pointed to a nearby shelter. The woman at the desk hesitated when he asked about Ava. She and her mom came in last month, she said cautiously. Good people. Her mom lost her job, waitressing. They've been trying to get back on their feet. His heart sank. All this time, he thought, she was smiling through so much, and I never even knew. He left the shelter in silence, the weight of Ava's resilience pressing heavily on him. That evening, his office lights stayed off. No emails. No reports. He just sat there, Ava's laugh echoing in his memory, and realized something painful and true. He had everything, except what really mattered. And suddenly, he knew he couldn't just sit and do nothing. That night, Alexander didn't go home. He sat in his office, city lights blinking below, his reflection staring back from the dark glass. But this time, he didn't see the powerful CEO. He saw a man who had let his heart grow distant, who had almost missed the most important connection of his life. And he knew exactly what he had to do. The next morning, before the first board meeting could begin, Alexander was on the phone, making quiet moves with powerful reach. He contacted a trusted nonprofit and arranged a fully furnished apartment for Ava and her mom, rent-free for a year. Through one of his smaller restaurant investments, he offered her mother a job, steady pay, flexible hours, close to home. He didn't want fanfare or recognition. This wasn't charity. It was personal. The next evening, he returned to the park, 2 cups of hot chocolate in hand, and an umbrella in the crook of his arm. And there she was. Ava sat on the swing like always, looking up when he arrived, her smile instant and wide. She ran to him. You came back, she chirped, grabbing the cup he handed her. Of course, he smiled. I missed my friend. They sipped cocoa under the shared umbrella as the wind whistled through the trees. Ava talked about her new place, how she and her mom now had a real kitchen, and how she was helping decorate her room with glow stars and paper lanterns. She didn't know what he had done. Not fully. She just knew he'd come back. That he cared. And that was enough. For the first time in years, Alexander felt something he hadn't felt since his childhood. Joy. The quiet kind, the kind that comes from giving, not gaining. And in that moment, he knew. Spring had settled over the city, dressing the trees in soft green and filling the parks with laughter. For Alexander, it had become his favorite season, not because of the weather, but because of the way life had changed. Every Sunday afternoon, he and Ava met in the same park. Sometimes they'd bring sandwiches, sometimes books. But always, they brought their time, for each other. It became their little tradition. Quiet, simple, real. One afternoon, Ava arrived carrying something behind her back. I made you something, she said, eyes bright with excitement. She handed him a folded piece of construction paper, purple, her favorite color. Inside was a crayon drawing, a tall man with glasses and a little girl on a park bench, holding hands under a rainbow. A golden sun smiled down on them. At the top, in wobbly letters, it read. This is what friends look like. Alexander stared at it, unable to speak. His throat tightened as he ran a finger over the words. No one's ever made me something like this, he finally whispered. Ava smiled, resting her head against his arm. Well. You're my best friend. He blinked back tears. This, he thought, was the success he'd been chasing his whole life, and it had come from a child's heart. The drawing now hangs in a simple frame on his desk, right next to a photo of Ava and her mom at her school's spring fair, both grinning, arms around each other, light pouring out of them. And when people ask Alexander Pierce about his greatest achievement, he doesn't mention tech empires or billion-dollar deals. He just points to the drawing and says, "I learned how to be a friend, because a little girl asked me to." And the miracle wasn't that she needed him. It was that he needed her.